Hi, I'm Mike Greiner, a Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is going in. If you agree with me, then please like this video, subscribe, and maybe hit that little bell that will let you know when I post a new video, because I do try to post videos pretty frequently. Today, we're going to continue talking about the situation with Joe Manchin announcing that he could not support the For the People Act. This is a big story, something that we have to really consider talking about. And I know there are a lot of people angry out there. I am angry. I can't believe that we have this situation with a Democratic senator basically creating a situation where we're unable to pass legislation that would deal with what the Republicans are doing to us in state after state after state by making it harder for people to vote. But that's Joe Manchin for you. And really, the truth is there's not a whole lot we as Democrats can do to him to convince him otherwise. In a video yesterday, and I'll post a link to the video up here or down there, wherever. In that video, I talked about some ideas of tactics that we can use to try to address this problem. But one thing that we cannot do is we cannot somehow change Joe Manchin's mind. We need to work within the confines of what we're dealing with. Now, like many Democrats, I had the reaction of thinking, this guy's not a Democrat. We need to get rid of him. But we need to think about that more. And that's what I want to talk about in this video today. With a theory that's been circulating about the internet that I've seen, which has to do with the fact that, well, maybe the Democratic leadership and Joe Biden actually appreciate what Joe Manchin's doing here. That the theory goes that they have basically asked him to take the bullet for the caucus and say we're not going to pass these things so that they can point to it and say, well, we tried, and ultimately get the benefit of it without actually having to expend the political capital to accomplish this goal. I'm skeptical about that theory, I must admit. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that the Democratic leadership might not necessarily be entirely on board with this approach, and they might not be willing to really go all out to try to accomplish the goals that we have here. Now, let me be clear here. I'm going to break up the Democratic leadership into a couple of groups. I think Nancy Pelosi, who I think is a great leader and is a true progressive and has shown repeatedly that she's willing to do what needs to be done to get our agenda accomplished. I think that she would be someone who is willing to push at all costs to try to accomplish what we have to. I'm less convinced that Chuck Schumer is that way. And even if he were, I'm less convinced that he's as effective as Nancy Pelosi is. I also think the jury is still out with the Biden administration as of right now. I mean, yes, they passed a great bill with the COVID Relief Act. Yes, they've done a great job addressing vaccinations, but they have yet to show that they're really fully on board with this idea of making fundamental change to try to address some of the inequalities when it comes to voting access, when it comes to labor rights. They've so far been great at the rhetoric, but let's see some delivery at this point. So again, the jury's still out on them. The point I'm making here, though, is that there might actually be a thought, at least among some of the leadership, and perhaps Chuck Schumer is one of them, saying, well, Joe Manchin can kind of be the person who takes the bullet for us not passing this legislation. And that's okay, because he's from a state where, number one, people probably like it. I mean, we have to remember, he's one of the senators who voted for Kavanaugh to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So he represents a conservative state. For him to be able to say, hey, I'm being the conservative even though I'm a Democrat, works for him politically. But there are other senators from other states who might not necessarily have the kind of protection in that regard that Joe Manchin does. One example that I can think of right off the top of my head would be the senator from New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan. She is up for re-election next year. She's a moderate. She represents a swing state at best. She only won election by about 1,000 votes in the last election. So she is definitely the number one target of Republicans in the upcoming Senate race. And she potentially faces a very popular Republican governor. She is definitely endangered. As a result, the Democratic leadership in the Senate might be taking the position that, hey, what we're going to do is allow Joe Manchin to block this legislation from coming to the floor so that other senators who might not have the political protection that he has, people like Maggie Hassan, for example, are able to not take tough votes on some of these issues. I think there might be something to that theory. The point of all this, though, is that it means that we as progressives need to keep the heat on. We cannot step back and simply expect that the Democrats in Congress and in the Senate are going to do our bidding. We cannot simply step back and say, oh, we've got the Democratic Senate, Joe Manchin and maybe Kyrsten Sinema are the only problems that we've got there. There are other problems there. We need to keep the pressure on all the Democratic senators to make sure that they are on board and willing to take the steps that are necessary to accomplish the For the People Act, to accomplish infrastructure, to accomplish the Families Act, to accomplish labor reform. All those things are necessary things that have to be passed by the Democratic Senate that are currently blocked by the filibuster. We need to make sure that all Democratic senators are on board, that the Democratic leadership is on board, and the way that we can do that is by keeping the heat on them as progressives across the country. So now is not the time to sit back. Now is not the time to take things for granted. Now is the time to keep the heat on and to pressure our leaders to think creatively, to come up with solutions to this problem, and to work the problem. That even if we can't count on Joe Manchin to do the right thing and support filibuster reform and support the things that we need to in terms of ballot access, then we can take other approaches to try to get it done anyway. And let me make one more point about this. I'm sure there are going to be lots of progressive Democrats out there who are going to say, oh, Joe Manchin, he may as well be a Republican. We don't even need him in the Senate. Let's get rid of him. We don't need somebody like that. I can sympathize with that sentiment, I must admit. I definitely had that thought cross my mind. But then the thing that occurred to me is, if he were not elected as a Democrat from West Virginia, then right now Mitch McConnell would be in charge of the Senate. We would not be approving judges and appointments that were made by the Biden administration. We would not have passed the COVID Relief Act. We would not even be able to talk about the possibility of accomplishing things through budget reconciliation. So as a result of that, resist the urge to get so angry at Joe Manchin, and angry at Joe Manchin I am, but resist that urge to get so angry at him that you say it's not worth having him in the Senate. It is worth having him in the Senate for those reasons alone. Now what we need to do is take it the next step to try to figure out a solution where we're able to pass the legislation that we care about, even though Joe Manchin has expressed the fact that he is not in support of it. So, with that being said, what I'm going to ask you is, if you agree with me or disagree with me, please post your comments in the area below. I love to hear your comments. I read them all and want to hear your opinions. I want to make this channel a place that we progressives can discuss these issues, so I want to get your input too. Also, please like the video, subscribe if you can, and maybe even hit that little bell to let you know when I'm going to post new videos. Last but not least, maybe contact your U.S. Senator and put some pressure on them. Certainly I'm going to be doing that with mine here in Michigan. And by having progressives all over the country keep the heat on, maybe we'll actually be able to get this done. So in the meantime, let's keep the faith in our cause, and I will see you next time. Take care.